Hi, I'm Eric Lee.
And I'm Carter Maudsley.
All right, if you guys don't know us, I feel sorry for you, and we're about to fix that. I'm the principal broker for the state of Utah. We're going to be talking about Utah forms today, so I've brought on with us Carter Maudsley. Carter, give us some of your background.
Oh, goodness. I'm an equity real estate agent since like 2008, I think. I'm a licensed attorney. I practice real estate law, and I have a very irreverent sense of humor.
And he's also on the UAR Forms Committee. So
Yeah.
he's the one that we get to blame for all of these new forms coming out. Actually, it's a pretty heated committee sometimes, I think, and nobody in there has a sole voice. Otherwise, I don't think we get anything done. But we do have a lot of changes that we want to go over. We don't want to belabor this. We're going to share the screen right now, and we are going to jump to the first big one that comes into play. Actually, here's the first big one that comes into play. Let me magnify it just a scooch. All right, it's our exclusive buyer broker agreement. How we get paid according to the settlement agreement, we have to have a written agreement in place with every buyer, every showing that we do, even if it's a showing with somebody out of state and we're walking through it in FaceTime. How do I get a written agreement in place with them? I can do a Zoom call with them. I can communicate my value, get a written agreement in place. I can fax it to them, email it to them. I could get a coconut pigeon.
Area,
What?
area.
All right, Carter, let's talk about this form.
Yes. All
So
right. Oh, go
really,
ahead.
we don't see a lot of changes here, right?
Not
And,
a lot of
and
change.
by the way, I'm just going to say this. There's reviews done by UAR attorneys. You can watch those. We're not trying to lead you away from those, but we will talk about some real life applications that maybe they didn't mention in those. So with that said, let's go ahead and not try to duplicate what everybody else did. But go ahead, Carter.
Yeah, no, and it includes a lot of things that were necessary, not only because of the settlement, but for example, this very first change, the ending date of the agreement, that is the end date. So this is now like the listing agreement. The day you sign it is the day it goes into effect, and that end date is the date that it expires. If you are using this for short-term agreements, or if you're using this in lieu of a showing agreement, you can make this agreement as long as you want. You know, we used to have a period in terms of months or days. Now you could do hours, you can do whatever you want. So you have a little bit more flexibility in how long this agreement is effective for.
Okay.
And
It does end at 5 p.m. So if I'm doing showings tonight and I want to sign a one-time closing, then I'm going to put tomorrow's date. I would put August 2nd. It will end at 5 p.m. That covers me for today's showings.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you could change the 5 p.m. time.
Right. All right. The next big change that we see here is we see this separated out. And again, in the old form, it was all lumped into one paragraph, and some people were treating it as an and or,
Yeah,
really an or.
it is an or, and it always has been an or. Luckily, we haven't had too many issues on this, but they have popped up. But yes, you can do a geographical limitation by county, or you can do a specific property limitation by a property or multiple properties.
So let's talk about some real life things. Now, me personally, I like my clients to be loyal to me anywhere they want. So I put any county in here because
Which
I'm
is
licensed all throughout the state of Utah. However, what if my client is shopping with me in Weber County? And so I've got Weber County. Could they go and sign one in Davis County with a different agent that runs concurrently with this? That means they're both active, valid buyer agency agreements running at the same time, one in Davis County, one in Weber County with a totally different agent. Is that feasible?
Yes, I believe it is feasible.
So
It's
that's
unfortunate.
something that, yeah, that's something that this is important. And by the way, they could have done that beforehand, right?
Right,
Before this
right.
agreement, they could have done that. They could have specified this one county with the other county. It's just now it gets a little bit more complicated because we may just be putting in one property. And so
Correct.
we've added some sections down here because that same concept that always existed could be exacerbated just a little bit. And so we've added this section down here. It says, unless it's checked below, the buyer warrants that the buyer has not entered into a representation agreement with another brokerage and has no obligation to pay compensation to any other company arising out of the acquisition of a property identified in section 1.2. So again, they could have one identified outside of that area and they're
Correct.
fine.
Mhm.
And then if they check this, that the buyer does have a representation with another brokerage because they went out and showed 3 or 4 homes and a different brokerage had them sign specific addresses on here, then we need to know those and specifically exclude them. And the way to do that would be to get a copy of that other buyer agency agreement so that we could specifically exclude it here.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else you would add to that?
Not to that. I've got a little bit to add on section 2, our brokerage fee, because that's how we get paid. And if you watched our other video, this needs to be filled out correctly, and this needs to be the result of a meaningful conversation between you and your prospective buyer. Gone are the days of relying on the MLS to compensate you. If you do not have a buyer agency agreement, or if this brokerage fee in 2.1 is marked as 0, you have no entitlement to commission. You don't have a contractual relationship with anyone to get paid for your work. In fact, as Eric mentioned, you will owe equity real estate money. Because if you don't make a commission on this, we're not going to waive our transaction fee because we're still taking on the risk of having you engaging in licensed activity as a company. So it's very, very important that you have a conversation with your client and put the appropriate amount of commission that you charge in this section 2.1. You also now have new options for the satisfaction of the brokerage fee by a third party. Not options, but more of a disclosure that you cannot receive more than that amount in 2.1 from any source, from the seller, from the seller's agent, from Uncle Lou. You are stuck at that number that you put in 2.1. So when I say meaningful conversation with your buyer, it also could be interpreted to a difficult conversation with your buyer, because now we're in the position to where we have to convey our value as real estate agents at the time we meet the buyer. Gone are the days of, well, just sign this so I can represent you and the MLS will pay me. Those days are no longer. And we are not in the habit of working for free, and we're prohibited from advertising as such. So a meaningful conversation about how much money you represent a buyer, put that in 2.1, knowing that you cannot receive any more than that. And we have a pretty lengthy conversation on that in the first video, Eric, where we go over the pitfalls of accepting more than what is on this agreement.
Correct. So you could negotiate down, you cannot negotiate up. So if you put 1% down here, that's your cap, that's your max. Okay, you don't get to come back and negotiate it up later on if a seller is offering 3%. So make sure that you understand this. And again, when he's referencing another video, we do a general video of understanding the whole settlement agreement and how that plays out. It's a little bit longer, but we wanted to do a separate one just for each of these forms. So understand, this is your max amount. You can always negotiate down. You cannot negotiate up, because it says right in here, we cannot accept total compensation greater than this amount. Anything else you see in this?
Just that last sentence in section 2.2. It's reminding the buyer that they are now responsible for compensating you. And if there's any difference between commissions offered by the seller or the seller's agent and what they've agreed to, we expect a payment from them. Like Eric said, though, if let's say you have 4% in your brokerage fee in 2.1, the seller is only offering 2.5%. And you figure for this client, it's worth the 1.5% haircut that you're going to take to do that services. Put it in writing that you're reducing your brokerage fee, accept that 2.5%, and your buyer will love you. But make sure you get their signature on it, acknowledging that they are no longer obligated to pay any difference.
Yep. A quick word of advice. We mentioned it in the other video. If you are, let's say that you've put 3% in here, you go and show a property that's offering 2.5% or 2%, and you're okay with that, you can add an addendum to this, reducing your commission. Best practice, reduce your commission specific to that property address only. In case that transaction falls through, you can take this client out, showing them other homes without now getting a 2% cap on everything that you do moving forward. The protection period has also changed in this language. Now, I kind of like this because we get a lot of agents trying to create disputes out of this. And quite frankly, what it means is once this agreement is over, you might put a 6-month protection period in here. And it has been this way forever with the listing agreement. This is the first time we see it reflected in the buyer agency agreement, but I think this is the right way to handle it. Once your contract, this time that you put up here is over, they can go out that afternoon and sign an agreement with a different brokerage, and your 6-month agreement has lasted only until that afternoon, and then it's gone. So your protection period isn't 6 months, it's the couple hours it took them to find somebody new. So in the absence of another agreement, yes, it could go 6 months, but that is a change to this. You should be aware of it. Any other substantive changes through this, or it's pretty much the same?
Pretty much the same. There's one more note I wanted to make on section 2. And because we were talking about accepting less commission based on what the seller was offering, or the cooperating broker was offering. That doesn't prevent you from asking for that difference in the purchase contract. We have the ability, and we went over it in the first video. You have the ability to negotiate the satisfaction of the full amount of that brokerage fee. Just because a seller is initially offering 1% doesn't mean that you can't go and attempt to negotiate a higher buyer agency commission to help the buyer satisfy the terms of this agreement within the contract itself. So it takes a little bit of a difficult conversation with your buyer to convey your value and why you do deserve that brokerage fee. But if you've already had that conversation when you said it with them, then they should be very, very well aware that by asking the seller to pay that full amount, you're actually doing the buyer a favor, because they're satisfying that amount on the buyer's behalf.
Thank you. And we will be covering that form. It's called the Real Estate Brokerage Payment Addendum. We're not going to go into it right now because we're trying to keep these concise for each form. So we'll be doing a different training on that here in just a second. As a part of this training, however, the settlement agreement requires that we have a written agreement in place. It doesn't have to be before we show any homes, right? It does not have to be the exclusive buyer broker agreement. It could be a limited showing agreement. Now, this is one that is brought to us by the Washington County Board of Realtors. It's something that they created down here. Carter was talking to me yesterday that we may pay them for licensing to get this. We'll do a couple quick tweaks to that, but until we have that ready, I wanted to show you this one. And the major difference with this is here in section 1, this purpose of this whole agreement is to allow the agent to give access to homes for sale, give limited information. Basically, we're reading off of our MLS sheet to them without warranty or verification, and general information of the process regarding purchasing a property. So if you would like to make an offer, then here's how I would help you. However, this does not create an agency agreement. It does not obligate the potential buyer to use you. So you could hypothetically use this form, go out showing homes to somebody in the afternoon. They could come back that evening to that same home and write an offer with a different agent. Okay, this does not create an agency relationship. It does not obligate that potential buyer to use you. All right. Or obligate the agent or brokerage. Go ahead.
Just remember, the name of the form speaks for itself. It is a limited showing agreement. You are agreeing to show properties.
Now you can come down here and you can say, I'm going to do this for free. I'm going to do this for $50. I'm going to do it for $1,000. I'm going to do it for $10,000, whatever. Okay. It's whatever you negotiate. And that is the key word of all of this stuff, is that everything is negotiable. And then again, we reiterate down here, this does not create agency. If you did want to make an offer, we'd have to do a separate written agency agreement for that. So make sure that you understand this is not the easy way to go out and do things. In fact, I would be hesitant to use this form at all, because you could really set yourself to be abused by this. But we do want to let you know that we are making this available because it is a legal way to still be in compliance with the terms of the NAR settlement. Anything else you'd add, Carter?
Nope, I think you covered it all.
Okay, sounds good. And I've got to stop the recording, and I don't see how.